Good evening and welcome back to A Conscience Presents. Well, it's election time, and as you know, the battles are heating up across the city of Pittsburgh. We hope that you're going to enjoy the show today as we're going to introduce to you Mr. David Schuilenburg. He's running for City Council, the 1st District, and he says that he has a 4-point plan for you in that district. So keep your mind open, sit back, relax, and let me introduce you to Mr. Dave Schuilenburg. Dave, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me on.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a newly naturalized U.S. citizen, came here in 2000 to marry the love of my life, have 2 children, and we own our house on the north side, so we're fully entrenched here. And basically coming from a country where, socialism and a lot of community good is done, I felt that if I was going to invest in my community, I need to give back to the community, and that's basically what I've done for the last 5 years. And now I've been drafted by my neighbors who've seen my actions over the last 5 years, and they've asked me to run, especially since there's no one else running against Ms. Harris. And I've accepted the honor and the privilege to run against her. So.
Well, let's go back. What country are you from?
I am from Montreal, Canada.
Montreal, Canada.
That's
so
right.
You're Canadian.
I am.
You came here to Pittsburgh when?
I came here in 2000. We were married in St. Patty's Day 2001, and been here ever since.
Okay, and your wife is a Pittsburgh girl?
She is. She's from Point Breeze.
Oh, children?
Yes, 2 children, 1
2
boy
children?
and 1 girl.
And their ages?
4 and 1.
So you're a family man.
Absolutely.
You live on the north side.
I do.
What part of the north side?
Summerhill, the same neighborhood as the mayor.
Same neighborhood as the mayor?
I do.
How close to the mayor are you?
More than a rock's throw away, but...
You ever have coffee with him?
No, I have not.
He never invited you up for coffee?
No, he has not.
So here you are, you're a family man, you're on the north side.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like that district? Is it quiet where you are?
It is. It's a very good district. Summerhill is a district of approximately 65% retirees. The remaining people that do work are mostly bureaucrats, such as myself. I'm a 911 dispatcher. You got a lot of police officers, firemen, medics, post office men, teachers. We literally have 625 houses in our neighborhood, 3 businesses, and we're probably the last fully residential neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh. So, for us, maintaining quality of life issues is a big thing, and some of the people who have either come in or who threatened to come in have learned just how much we take pride in our neighborhood and try to maintain the quality of life in Summerhill.
So District 1 is a fairly large district. I don't know very much about that. Tell me what's the makeup of your district?
The makeup, well, first of all, geography-wise, it's an upside-down L, if you would. Troy Hill, Spring Hill, City View, Fine View, Summerhill, Perry, Observatory Hill, Brighton Heights, and then if you come back down a little, Marshall, Shadeland, a little bit of Manchester and Perry, north and south. It's a good makeup of half and half. Brighton Heights and Summerhill and Observatory Hill are pretty, we're not CDBG eligible, so that tells you enough about our income levels. Spring Garden has had, unfortunately, is probably the neighborhood that needs the most help. They've got more abandoned houses there than Millvale does, so not a lot of people know that. Fine View is resurrecting itself pretty well. Allegheny East is doing a good job of fixing itself up pretty well. And Troy Hill is, unfortunately, they've been the battered child of the city lately. They've lost their firehouse, they've lost their rec center, so they're struggling, but they're trying to maintain. And my goal, if I were to be elected, would be to help out the whole district, and not only the CDBG eligible groups, but the whole.
What is that? Because you said that and that kind of went right by me.
CDBG eligible is a community block grant funding.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically given down from the federal government. It's for neighborhoods that meet a requirement of 80% or lower of the poverty level. In other words, they take into account income, they take into account crime statistics, so on and so forth. And in the city of Pittsburgh, most of the plans that you ever hear talked about, whether it's by the mayor or what have you, is for example, his housing initiative in the 28 neighborhoods. Most of those neighborhoods are CDBG eligible. That's why he can do that, because he'll get some money from there.
And that money comes from where?
It comes from the federal government. It's to put into initiatives and projects to help out those lower income people.
Who decides what the projects go win? Would that be your job as a
That,
councilman?
yeah, well, actually, it would be the job of the mayor and for council to debate and to approve or decline. But yes, most of it comes through there. And there's other programs too. There's neighborhood needs money and stuff, and some of that is aligned based on that, some isn't. But yeah, that's the job of the council members.
So what is the racial makeup of your district? Is it predominantly black or a good mix, or is it very diverse? What would you say?
Last time I checked the 2000 statistics, I believe I saw that it was at least there was at least a third of the district that was African American. I believe it'd be more closer to the 40%, 45% mark. Brighton Heights, as I said, and Summerhill and Observatory Hill are, for the most part, they're well-earned income families. However, Observatory Hill themselves, they've got a couple of areas that have some poverty levels on certain streets that are, for some reason, seem to be poverty-stricken. But for the most part, the lower-income people are in Spring Garden and in Manchester and Perry South and stuff. And
have you gotten into those neighborhoods?
I have.
Talk to some of those people and see what their needs are.
Absolutely. You weren't talking about the campaign yet, so yeah, I've basically been to about 20 to 25 of the precincts where where the incumbent is most vulnerable. I started from the bottom and working my way up, and so yes, obviously I've been through North Charles Street, and I've been through Marshall Shadeland, and I've been through portions of Summerhill, and I live there, but Perry High and near Perry High and Observatory Hill and stuff, and I've got connections also with the community groups, so I deal with them on a daily basis too. So, you know, talking about profiles, as I said, I'm a 911 dispatcher. I'm part of the public safety committee on the north side, so I've visited a lot of these people and found out firsthand what exactly they want. We've heard a lot over the last few weeks, especially with Pittsburgh and Northside United. I've talked to a lot of people to hear their side of the story, because everyone has a stake on the north side, and that's the goal. Is we want to bring everyone into the loop, and everyone has to take part in bringing the city forward. And
it's so often that you hear about plans. We want to do this, we want to do that, and it seems like people in government always want to hand something in to the black communities, and we're saying, wait a minute, let us have a seat at the table. How do you feel that? Would you make a difference in that way?
Well, and that's interesting. You said a seat at the table. That's what's missing, and that's what I would bring with this campaign, is that, as you said, they hand out, and I don't believe in handouts. I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social liberal. And when you say a seat at a table, that's the thing. We have to have the table. No one wants to take up that challenge of organizing a table of all the leaders, whether it's fed, state, or local, have them sitting there, have the neighborhood groups sitting there, and even average citizens. Sometimes it's just a group of 3 or 4 citizens. Like in my neighborhood, we're trying to build a park. We have no parks, no facilities, nothing. So a few of the new younger families that have moved in, we're trying to build a park, and we know where to get the money and stuff. Well, by having this table, as you said, and putting it in front of them, in front of the media and everything, so everyone knows we set a master plan for the whole north side, so everyone gets a stake and everyone gets a say in how that master plan is formulated, so that way everything is done. Part of my campaign is basically to restore credibility and transparency. Transparency is the big thing, and that's why if I get elected, I want to focus on creating that table. That table has not been there for a long time, and the north side is really struggling because of it. I think there's so much potential. That's one thing that Bob and I agreed upon, was that he believed in Pittsburgh and that it was living it didn't live up to its potential. I believe the same with the north side. There is so much the north side could live up to, and it's unlived so far. So.
You got a 4-point plan.
I do.
Let's get into your plan a little bit, and let's talk about this and let some people get some insight of what Dave Schuilenburg is all about. Let's start with number 1. Reforms our government to today's realities, restoring credibility and transparency, which kind of rolls into what you were saying.
Absolutely.
Help us with that.
Well, for one of the reasons I'm running also, and the people actually tried to recruit me, was because of the lack of leadership that we would say is on the north side. I believe in a philosophy, and I'm sorry if I read from notes. I work the night shift, so otherwise I'll fall apart. Leaders establish a vision for the future and set a strategy for getting there. They cause change. They motivate and inspire others to go in that direction, and they, along with everyone else, sacrifice to get there. This is Harvard professor John Cotter who said that. That's the philosophy that I abide by, I agree to. And what I'm doing in terms of running is to try to restore credibility, and that part of the credibility is the biggest part of the credibility gap in city council. For example, right now, they're on record, they're wasting money, they're voting on things to break the law. It's every time they do something, it comes up in the media. It's a bad thing, and no matter what what we want to do, whether it's improving public safety or bringing people back into the city, people are not going to come back into the city if they can't trust their elected officials to know that they're going to be spending their hard-earned tax money and be good stewards of that money. So we have to restore that. So in regards to that, my plans for those would be to decrease the size of council temporarily until the population significantly shifts back in the upward direction.
Hold it right there. Decrease the size of city council. Okay, we've heard this before. This was a Republican proposal that came through, I believe, last year to cut council from 9 seats down to 5. What do you mean by that when you say?
Because a lot of Democrats obviously don't want to do that. It's a 4-to-1, 5-to-1 margin in the city, so of course they're threatened by something like that. For me, it's more of a numbers aspect. Right now, I don't know if you know, but city councils are in $55,000, and next year they're due for a 10% raise based on the budgets from last year and even this year's budget that the mayor has brought. And then in 2011, that goes up to 20%. So just the numbers-wise, that's where I'm getting at. Like I said, once we stem the hemorrhaging of citizens leaving the city and start bringing back some, and let's say we end up back up to 350,000, okay, let's review bringing back more council members. Right now, we need to put our financial house in order. When my family ever had problems with our finances, we cut the cable out from $100 to $30. Well, that's what we need to do temporarily at city council level.
Well, what district would take a loss?
That is something that the citizens would have to decide. There's obviously a process that would have to be followed for redistricting and stuff like that. But by having reformers and progressives on council to assure that it's an open process, I think that can be done. Even if it only comes down to, let's say, 7 members with 2 at large. You know, you have 5 districts plus 2 council members at large. That's something. It's a dent because you're not only talking about their own salary, which, as I just indicated, is high. You're talking about their staff and so on and so forth. So,
okay.
And then in regards to, as I said, council credibility, there's eliminating the walk-around money, so that way the money that's spent is all done in a transparent method. I said about the table earlier. I would also introduce a right-to-know act at the city level. Some cities across the state have it. Butler County has a couple, and so do I think the East has some too. And I would create an office of an ombudsman who is independent from council and the mayor to be able to administer that. I would open. There's some issues in our district that remain untouched. For example, we don't have a district office. We rarely get a newsletter from our council member. Most of the time, it's from our state rep or from Mr. Doyle. So I would, as council member, I would issue at least one newsletter a year to the constituents, so that they, as I said, it's an open process. They know what it is, and you can be reached, and they can have input into what's going on, and they know what's going on a constant basis. And then and that's about it for that.
So let's go into number 2. Makes our neighborhood safer using a 2-prong approach. Let's hear this approach.
Well, this is going to be a controversial thing. I'm more of, as I said, I'm also a 911 officer, so I have to take that background into respects. But for one of the things I believe in is a 1,000-man force. There's been naysaying going around, especially by my opponents, saying that 911 has gotten worse in the last few years, which is absolutely not true. Actually, since we've merged with the county, we've increased staffing. All the city 911 dispatchers who stayed with us, stayed with the job, have stayed in the central zone of the county. In other words, they serve just the city. Our wages have gone up, and our response time to calls, because that's all we do is really take the calls and dispatch them. Our response time to handling those calls have improved a lot. So has quality assurance. There's still some issues, but you're going to have that in no matter what industry. We have to start helping out the public safety officers and address the real issue. And the real issue here is that the city of Pittsburgh is used, or the citizens are used to the 1,300 force that they had way back in the 90s. And now it went all the way down to 700. We're now back up to 875 as we speak. But when they say that 911's not responding, no, we don't respond. We dispatch the officers, but that's all we can do is we can only dispatch what we have. Unlike going into a grocery store, you run out of money, you put the rest on the credit card. We can't make up officers. So I believe in a 1,000-man force to get to there.
Is that the first prong?
That's one prong. Well, that's one part of the policing aspect. There's a policing aspect, and then there's actually a gun aspect. The policing aspect is that, and the other aspect, as I said, that's controversial, is mandatory carrying of ID. Because I believe in officers that pull over someone, whether it's usually for a reasonable cause. For example, if you're walking down East Ohio Street here on the north side on a Friday night, and you, not that you would, but you urinate on the wall, and an officer wants to give you a ticket and says, "What's your name?" You say, "Joe Blow, 123 ABC Street." that ticket's going to sit in the system. Now we've got 52,000 tickets sitting there. That number is actually going to be higher if we would actually have good addresses for everyone that we would give a ticket to. And that's because people don't have their, they don't have to carry ID on them. And even worse, what that does is when an officer pulls you over and you don't have the ID, what's the worst he can do? He'll take you down to the station, he'll take you down to the MCB building and keep you there all overnight, and that'll make your life worse. But in the meantime, that's one or two officers that I, as a dispatcher, can't turn around and send to other calls, you see. And if there was a mandatory carrying of ID, that number would decrease, and I'd have more officers available to send to domestics and shootings and so on and so forth. So it's really that aspect. I'm not promoting more stop and searches. I'm just saying that basic law should be that you have to carry ID. You have to do it when you drive a car. It's just a reasonable expectation that you should have something in case, if you're not going to do anything, that's one thing. But if you know you're going to go drinking, carry ID on you. So.
How have you ran that past anybody to see what the feedback was on that?
I have.
What has been the feedback?
Obviously, the police officers would agree, and some of the citizens groups are still on the fence, but when they realize that would free up more officers, that's when they usually join in online. Like I said, I'm not promoting more stop and searches. I'm saying this is for a reasonable cause, and when they do stop you for reasonable cause, it's to be able to process you faster, give you your ticket, and they can get on their way and do their next stop. So, okay. And then there's the third aspect of the police aspect, which is destruction of guns. Philadelphia currently, if they pick up a gun and it was acquired through criminal use, they destroy the gun. They do not give it back to the homeowners. In Pittsburgh, we give them back to the homeowners, no matter how the gun was. We talk about getting the guns off the street. Well, we're just recycling the guns. They're going back on the street, and so we need that kind of program to get rid of those guns as they come in. Believe it or not, the two most important ways why guns come into the streets are either A, outside counties bringing them in because they're trading them for drugs, or B, they're elderly people that pass away, and the kids in the neighborhood know who it was. They know Mr. Johnson had a gun in a certain area of the house. Before the family can come and recuperate all the effects, they go in, they break in, they steal the gun, and that gun now is on the street. And then there are third cases where there's kids that are picking up the guns and the parents just don't know about it. Believe it or not, in 2006, 610 violations of the arms code was infringed upon, and 2/3 of those were people 24 and under, and that includes kids 16 and 14 and 12. You talk about guns on school buses and stuff, It's incredible how it's one thing to be a responsible gun owner, and those are the guys we're not going after. It's really the guns that we want to get off the street, and that's where I come in. So, and then the other aspect, as I said, is about the laws, changing the guns, ban on semi-automatic weapons. That's a personal opinion. That's also to save my colleagues. They're outmanned and they're outgunned out on the street. Kids and farmers, for that matter, don't need semi-automatic weapons. It's one thing to be serving in Iraq and bringing one back as a memento, but they're not going to war with deer. So, I don't think there's a need in the city of Pittsburgh to have a semi-automatic weapon.
So you would ban that?
I would ban semi-automatic weapons.
You would
yes.
support a bill that would ban
that? That would, yes. I'd also stricter sentences for straw purchases. That's where you're a good resident, you go buy a gun, you get it, and then you give it to me for $50. Stricter sentences for that kind of thing. And yeah, and then microstamping, which is basically a tattoo on the inside of the chamber so we can identify the gun. And if that gun keeps coming back up, that'll just prove my point some more about how the guns are just recycling back on the street. So, and these, by the way, are programs that New York City had implemented and Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia just got it in the last year or so, but New York has had it, I think, for 2 or 3 years now, and they have seen a drastic cut in their gun crime. So it's something that works. Even if it's just the mandatory carrying of ID aspect, once there's a suspicion that you might get stopped and you're going to be ID'd, it's a deterrent, let's put it that way. So.
Okay. So that covers two, make our neighborhood safer using a actually a three-prong approach. Okay. Let's go into number 3. Attracts new owners to the city and reinvests in our current citizenship.
Absolutely.
This is a biggie in the city because this is something that actually rolls into not only the economic foundation, but also the social foundation. People don't want to come to a city that is boring, so to speak. We see our young people leaving here so often. What would you do to attract new owners to a city? And not just that. We hear very often that this city, and we were talking about this before the show, and I was telling you that for black folk in this town, there's not a lot to do. We don't find, I have company come in all the time from different states, and they come here, and I have nowhere to take them.
Except for watching the good programming on PCTV.
Yeah, I have nowhere to take them. We have very little to do. So when we talk about bringing new people to the city, and right now you're talking to the Conscience family, what is it that Dave Schuilenburg can do to maybe increase the diversity? We hear that word diversity.
Absolutely.
And it really doesn't mean anything to us in this town, because when you talk about diversity, it means everybody other than us, and we've seen this for years.
Actually, my plan would address that aspect of it also. Before I go into that real quickly, what I would say is the problem is the mentality of the leadership in government at this point. They spend more than they bring in, and we need to review how we deal with things like that. And as a institution, you have you collect taxes and you spend it, but that's all they see. And sometimes they see just the spending part, okay? But you also have powers to enable or empower other organizations to do stuff, and also you have a service that you can provide not only your citizens but your employees, and that's where my plan comes in. And basically where I take that is, if you were to run the city as a business, we'd be bankrupt right now, first of all, but there's no argument about that. But if you were to run the city as a business, okay, in places like, I've worked for a telecom company and I had I got free cable, internet, and phone, okay, because I was an employee. Well, here's where my plan comes in. I would introduce, as I said, I would create that table, which is the Northside Socioeconomic Summit, so that way everyone had a stake and say in which way we go. But from there, I would introduce a couple of initiatives, and these are my baby initiatives that I really would want to get in. I would want to introduce a first-time home buyer program for city residents who work in the city. In other words, someone buys a house, whether they're living with their parents right now, they buy a house, they work in the city, and they can prove that it's their first home, okay? Those are the couple of criteria, and they have to obviously be there for a minimum, and in my case, I would say 5 years, because usually if you have a house for 2 years or less, that means you're flipping the houses, you're just buying them to sell. So you stay the 5 years, then you get your 5 years taxes back. That's my first program. So basically, it's a first-time home buyer abatement tax. The difference between mine and the mayor's right now is that his is only, as I said at the beginning, is geared to 28 neighborhoods. Mine would be citywide. You work, you live in the city, you get this abatement. You get a stake in what's going on. That would attract a lot of younger folks to start coming in. Secondly, I would replace, and this is a controversial one, I'd replace the residency requirement with two things. First of all, for applicants, you get a point system if you live in the city. So that way, two candidates of equal value, equal experience, the city guy gets the job, just like you add points for veterans. The second thing I would replace the residency requirement with is a tax break for the city employees. And I mean, it's not people that live in the city and work in the city. I'm talking about the city, Pittsburgh employees that actually work for the city. That way, it's like I said, the giving back of the cable and the phone and the internet. This is their way, the city's way of thanking the loyalty of those employees. And the reason for that is quite simple. You talk about the diversity aspect, and that's exactly where actually I came up with the idea. We've seen questions about how it's hard to hire firemen, especially of minorities. There's a whole bunch of firemen that live out in East McKeesport and in East Pittsburgh and Monroeville that would be willing to hire to come work for the city, but they can't because they're not residents of the city. This would bring in qualified people no matter what race, and it would attract them. They could actually have a choice to say, someone from Monroeville might say, yeah, I'll go work in a firehouse in Homewood. It's on their way, it's on that side of the city. So it does touch on the diversity aspect of it. And so, these two brainchild ones, these are what I would try to introduce to bring in new people. But as I said at the beginning, no one's going to move into the city until, A, we obviously deal with the public safety issue, but even before that, until we can stop the bleeding. In other words, council is spending more than they are taking in. I don't care how much they say they balanced the budget, they did not. There's vague numbers about the nonprofits and stuff.
What are you saying here? I'm short,
Mr. Peduto's actually on record last night on another show saying that the numbers even from last year to this year have changed, but nothing's changed. Why did the numbers go up all of a sudden? And he's absolutely right. I've looked just at the salary aspect, and I can show you that on the thing. So that's the other aspect of it. And there's a couple of other things, such as creating nonprofit housing co-ops to assist the people that are coming out of the housing associations to go into their own independent living kind of programs. And I was the president of one before, so I know what it's like to be a stakeholder in that, and that gets you up and going.
Well, let's go to your fourth plan quickly.
Okay.
Propels Pittsburgh into a leadership role in building a sustainable urban environment.
Absolutely. Quickly, that's basically the environmental issues. Some of the stuff, we want to leave the place better than it was for our children. We've got a bad problem on the north side with parks. They need to be rehabbed, or even some need to be built. As I said, in my neighborhood, we don't have any facilities, so we need a park up there. I would introduce more bicycle paths, walking paths, get more garbage cans on the street. If your street's littered, how can you take pride in it? It's basically stuff like that. There's also creating a system of nonprofit horticultural gardens. As you've seen in the city paper today, someone's doing that. In Montreal, we actually have 300 of them. And as I said, you're a stakeholder, you create your own garden, and you actually can live off of it to some extent. So, and the last thing is to create an assistance program for lower income people to replace their old windows with environmental, more energy efficient windows and stuff like that. So.
Dave, you seem like you have your plan down. Sounds like a good plan. You're very intelligent. You've done the numbers, you've done the work. I want you to look into the camera and tell the Conscience family, African-American family, why they should vote for you and not vote for Darlene, who has that teddy bear hug on the community. But you had a low voter turnout in your district. Why would an African-American vote for Dave Schuilenburg?
Well, I contend, first of all, that she doesn't have that much of a stranglehold. When I go door to door, as I said at the beginning, I've met a lot of you, whether you're African Americans or Caucasian. I've met a good many of you guys door to door, and what I'm hearing from the door is something I subscribe to the same, which is most people believe that the grieving period of the city has ended. They will not accept inaction anymore. We're now looking at a 4-year term, and they want to hear what the plans are. My opponent does not have a plan. She's on record as not having a plan. Even in her brochure, that's all she has is her picture and no plan. So people are disenfranchised. And basically what it's going to come down to on election days, when you're in that voting booth, you're going to get to choose between someone who, instead of having a plan, has to go on her record, which is on the school board, wasting millions of dollars opening a couple of schools for less than 150 people and losing millions of dollars from foundations. And then on city council, buying a smoke eater, voting to break the law. That's a good way to get Harrisburg to be on your side, you know. Or you can have someone who's got a plan. My plan might be controversial in some aspects, but at least it's open for debate. At least there's something to start. There's a starting point, and we can all rally together around it and say, okay, well, let's rework this one or that one. The point is that the next 4 years, we cannot afford more wasteful spending. And unfortunately, in my district, my council member is probably the queen of misspending. And I thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
We will, it's something new. It's new to the city. These are new candidates that are coming out, including in the 9th District as well. You know, this is you have a contested race here. I commend you for standing up and taking charge and you know, trying to make a change in this city. And that's something that we really, really need.
Well,
so I wish you luck.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back on the show sometime.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're elected or if you're not.
Even if I'm not, I'm willing to comment.
Talk about what it is, okay?
Yep.
So have a good time.
Thank you.
When we come back, I'm going to introduce you to a black Republican of the 9th District. His name is Donald Woods, and you're going to be very interested in hearing what he has to say. When the Conscience Presents comes back, I'm Dave Adams. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Does your child have asthma? Did you know asthma attacks can be triggered by things like shower curtains? A child